Welcome to another episode of Photo Enthusiastic. I'm your host Jim Fair, here today to talk about the Nikon D780 and how does it compare to the camera it replaces, the D750, and how it compares to the Z6. This camera will autofocus AFD glass, and I think Nikon is trying to charge extra for that because it has exactly the same sensor as the Z6 and the same processor. The autofocus in live view is exactly the same as the Z6. The only thing that's different is it's got a mirror in it and an optical viewfinder instead of an EVF. I can't believe the EVF is cheaper than an optical pentaprism. So why is Nikon charging so much for this camera? Now, I managed to get mine for about 2,500 Canadian, but in the stores it's advertised at like $2,800 or so, and that's just too much. Compared to the D750, it is just slightly faster at 7 frames per second. When you hold it in your hand, it feels almost the same. It's slightly bulkier, slightly heavier. Again, not by very much. Biggest things that are missing, the ability to do vertical grip and the pop-up flash. It's also not compatible with your old ML-L3 infrared remote. So that's unfortunate. But again, not a big deal because you can use SnapBridge with the Wi-Fi like I'm doing here. I've set it up so I can see myself, and because the screen doesn't articulate. Biggest thing missing compared to the Z6, of course, is in-body image stabilization. So you have the same sensor and pretty much the same output for video. You're not getting 422 10-bit RAW out the port, but that was a paid upgrade anyway. It was like $250 Canadian to upgrade your Z6 to do that, whereas this will just do 10-bit N-Log out the HDMI port. If you're a still shooter and you do a bit of video, this is a great camera for you, as long as you're not doing a lot of it handheld, because you will need some sort of stabilization, and the built-in stabilization with its 10% crop, it just doesn't cut it. You can't really walk around with that or use it as a vlogging camera and walk and talk at the same time. Just really not going to happen. The shutter Mech is better than in the D750. It goes up to 1/8,000th of a second this time and all the way out to 15 minutes. It still has an intervalometer, but now you can take those intervalometer frames and turn them into a time-lapse movie with exposure smoothing, which is nice. It also has a new focus stacking feature, which requires third-party software to assemble the file when you're done. Another difference, that screen on the back is a touch screen, and in live view, touch to focus or touch to shoot is really very handy. You do have to get sort of used to shooting in live view. I mean, why buy a DSLR if you're going to spend all your time in live view? Well, it'll autofocus all that old glass, that's why. Yeah, is it worth the extra money? I don't know. That's a choice only you can make. But that's how it compares to the D750 and the Z6. Who would I say it's for? I would say it's for enthusiasts who like DSLRs and prefer that experience. And now it has live view that actually works. Live view that works is something not to be sneered at. It's still live view. Yes, I get it. It's not going to be as stable. You hold the camera out in front of you. But you can get down low, you can hold it up high over a crowd, and you can see, and you can tap to focus, tap to shoot. What's not to like? So again, you're giving up the IBIS mechanism, and you're getting a very capable DSLR. It's a little heavier than the Z6, yes. But by the time you put the FTZ adapter and a grip on it so you can have that FTZ adapter flush when you put it down on a desk, your weight is getting pretty close to this camera anyway. Still comes with the clunky MH25A charger, but now you can charge over USB-C. In terms of autofocus detection, it's the exact same module as before, but now it has the D5 algorithm. Of course, it's not going to be just like a D5, but it's much improved. And you still have those 51 autofocus points clustered in the center of the optical frame. 15 of them are cross type. Great, but when you switch to live view, you've got 273 points right on the sensor, and you can tap to focus anywhere or tap to focus and shoot. And detection goes all the way down to -6 EV in live view. It's only -3, like the D750's -3 in optical. Video is limited to 30 minutes record time. Of course, it does 4K all the way up to 30p, and it'll do HD, full HD, out to 120p. So you've got all the different frame rates in between, including 60, 100, and the usual 24, 25, 30. Would I buy a D750 in this day and age? No, I don't think I would, because the sensor in that, the Sony IMX-128, first came on the market in 2012, September 2012, in the D600 and in a Sony Cybershot that had a fixed 35mm lens. It may have been in an alpha as well, it's hard to tell. And some of the information on this is not exactly reliable, so take it with a grain of salt. But I believe that sensor's been around since 2012. So you're using 8-year-old technology, whereas the Z6 sensor is only a year old, a year and a half maybe now, right? So the backside illuminated sensor, yeah, maybe you have to worry about those stripes sometimes, but I haven't seen them in the low light shots I've taken, and I did some really low light stuff. I mean, you have to be careful with it. Like I went around this little car show last night, and with the 50-1.4, and now I could go all the way out to 1.4, but a really, really shallow depth of field at that aperture. So if I stopped down to f8 or f11 to get decent depth of field, my ISO was up in the thousands. So I can show you a couple of sample images so you see what I mean. The image doesn't fall apart by any means. It's way better than what the D750 did in terms of low light. Now, some people have complained that the JPEGs on this are over-processed. I don't find that, but then again, I never shoot JPEG, hardly ever. If I do, I'm shooting JPEG plus RAW, and I'm doing it for a particular reason, and I would turn off certain features of the camera that can make your JPEGs mushier. Some of the defaults may not be what you desire. The color is the same Nikon color you always get, which is fantastic. The ISO range is pretty much identical to the D750, but now you can go out to 204,800. In terms of speed, it's a half frame per second faster, optical, and up to 12 frames per second in live view. So, what are you getting? You're getting a full frame sensor, no IBIS, but you're getting the ability to autofocus all of that old glass. So that's kind of who it's aimed at, I believe. And when the price comes down and they finally get rid of the D750, I think the price will come down. I think it's a decent DSLR camera. It's not really that revolutionary at all. It's using technology that's already out there, but it does do that autofocus on the D lenses that you don't have with an FTZ adapter, and I think that's an important thing. If you're going to build a lens library, you can do it on F-mount way cheaper than you can on the Z-mount, and plus there's so much more choice out there. So you have a choice of AFS glass, AFD glass, all the old Nikkor stuff that includes anything AI converted, with very, very few exceptions. The odd exception where some element would stick out and touch the mirror. You have to be careful there. But for your average lens, like a 35 or a 50mm, it converts just fine. In fact, I even have a Yashinon 50mm f1.7 with F-mount adapter. It works great on this camera. So you just go to utilities, non-CPU, and you put in the focal length and the fastest aperture of the lens, and away you go. You use the aperture ring. You can use an aperture ring on the DSLR. Who would have thought, eh? The only Nikon body that has more compatibility with old glass would be the DF, because it'll use non-AI. It's an interesting choice, and it's a choice I made because I'm not really video-centric. But I don't rule out adding, say, a Z5 to my collection with an FTZ adapter, so I can still use a lot of this glass. And maybe I will have both, the best of both worlds, right? That would be cool. Anyway, that's all I have to say today. Thank you for watching. Fade out.